Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at Binford Chronicles again, where you get authentic truth from real people that share their knowledge, experience, and stories. Today, our special guest is Robert Lego-Mann Morss, a patriot that served our nation and a well respected middle school history teacher. Robert's life is dedicated to God, country, community, family, and education. And in 2020, his life took a turn that would shake the foundation of his world. Robert is here to tell his story. Robert, thank you for joining us today. Your story is so important, and the 2020 election was stolen. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So, Robert, we want to know your story, the real you, before J6 up to the event of J6. How did you get labeled Lego-Mann, first of all? Share that story with us. Oh, let me pull you up. So let me get you on up. Sorry, I got carried away.
How's it going? Thank you very much
it
for having me. It's an honor to be here.
it's going good. I'm really excited about having you on board.
Yeah, this is a thrill. Well, what I can say is that the Lego Man moniker came, I guess, as like a blessing in disguise, if you will. When I was arrested on June 11th, 2021, the feds were, ransacking my apartment as I was being dragged to the Allegheny County Jail here in Pittsburgh. But what they found in my apartment were very dangerous items, such as the United States Constitution and, oh my gosh, a Bible. So as they're passing these really incriminating objects, they also discovered my nuclear stockpile of Legos that I had in my apartment. I, no shame, love Legos. I think it awakens the engineering brain in all of us. And I also like the idea of bringing Legos into the classroom. So if any of my students were kind of struggling with any ADHD, stuff like that, they would have something in their hands to, just kind of fiddle with while the lesson was ongoing. So I think Legos have a pretty big impact in the minds of us all. But as they're going through this little stockpile of Legos that I had, they found none other than the Lego model kit of the United States Capitol. Now, granted, this is a Lego set that Lego, the company, sold. I just had it in my possession. And so these guys figured, wow, this must be evidence of the fact that Robert Morse had to have planned the January 6th Capitol riot all by himself with his plastic children's toys. So they package this whole thing up. They take it to court. Several weeks later, I enter the gulag, the DC gulag with the rest of the January 6ers. I'm greeted to a hero's welcome. They say, "What's up, Lego man?" And I'm, looking around like, you got to have the wrong guy. I don't know what you're talking about. That's when they introduced me to the Miranda Devine article, which annotated the blockheads at the FBI and how they actually tried to take this Lego set before the judge and pin the whole riot on me. That I was the architect of the insurrection because of these Legos. And the judge takes one look at this thing and says, "How is any of this possible if the Legos are still in the box?" It was an unopened box of Legos. So that
Yeah.
gets thrown out. And the Lego Man was born. There's plenty of goofy memes that still exist about, the cops breaking into people's homes, searching for Legos and stuff. And it was a sliver of dark comedy that I was able to glean from this horrific situation. But I'm keeping the name because it's also a reminder of how far our government will go to try and prove their extremely dishonest narrative based off of a plastic children's toy. So, yeah, me, Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, and Elon Musk, we're all sitting around with our Lego set planning how to take over the United States government. That's, yeah, caught me red handed.
Yeah. So, Robert, I really wanted to get you on because a lot of people don't have this misconception that the J6ers are these, insurrectionists and they're bad people. Tell us a little about yourself and how you grew up and how, all a little bit of a, a chronology of where you ended up ending going to the Capitol. A lot of people went to the Capitol. There were
Right.
buses of old people
Yeah.
traveling to the rally, and then they just followed the big crowd to the Capitol, so that nobody
Right.
was really there to cause an insurrection. So tell us a
No.
little about yourself so people get to know our J6ers are people just like us.
Right. Well, thank you for that opportunity. And just to pinpoint something that you said, nobody had a plan to go. That was something that the FBI confirmed later on that year, that based off of their investigation, there was no grand plan that anybody had with the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, nobody to enter the Capitol that day. That right there never showed up in any of our defense whatsoever. And that's something that your viewers can go find out. The FBI confirmed that there was no plan. Anyways, I grew up in Reno, Nevada. I was raised near Lake Tahoe. I don't know if any of your listeners know what Lake Tahoe is or what it looks like, but to me, that's a little piece of heaven on earth. It's got to be the most beautiful, crystal clear waters I've ever seen in my life. And I was that close that I could drive there after school. I grew up hunting, backpacking, hiking. I'm a Boy Scout, so I lived my life outdoors. Obviously raised to love the Republican Party, and I was raised right. So I say my pleas and thank yous, and I say my prayers before me and my family eat around the dinner table at night. So that's the type of person that I was and still am, and all the way up until I left for the army at 17. So I I had to sign a waiver so that I could serve my country early before I was 18, because you can only legally join the military at the age of 18 unless your parents and you sign a waiver to release yourself. I was willing to sign that dotted line to fight for this country, and I had my 18th birthday in basic training, where I didn't know it at the time, but I was going to become an airborne ranger after all that training. Then again, my background in hunting and camping helped with my marksmanship skills, and my time in cross country and track and martial arts helped with my athleticism in the Army. So that all kind of really came together in a beautiful way so that I could thrive and become a ranger. I served as a ranger in 2nd Ranger Battalion for 3 combat tours to Afghanistan. On the first tour, though, is when I decided to become a high school history teacher. So as I walked through the bombed out location of Sharana, Afghanistan, and noticed how people were being treated like cattle and that they didn't understand what it meant to have God given rights or even the notion of freedom and liberty, I recognized that my country could turn into this wasteland if the next generation did not know how to keep the republic. And so I I addressed the fact that I think I could make more of an impact for our nation in the classroom as opposed to using my M4 or my mortar system that I was trained to operate at the time. So I leave the Army. I conclude my contract with honor and then use my GI Bill to go to Penn State up in Pennsylvania. I moved to Pennsylvania in 2016. Me and my dad drove from Reno, Nevada to Pennsylvania across the country over the summer. That was a really cool experience. I got to see so many amazing little nooks and crannies of this nation that goes maybe a little unnoticed, but I got to see, a lot of our monuments and be proud to be an American, like my
Hmm.
pride for this country was never stronger, so I got to see even Thomas Jefferson's home in Virginia. So I got to go to Monticello of all places. So it was just so cool, that road trip. But anyways, I go to college, use my GI Bill, make a lot of friends there, have a blast. And in 2020, as we all know, that's when the pandemic hits. And the pandemic was necessary because they had designed the election to be stolen, and you needed to have a pandemic to cover the efforts in order for that election to be successfully robbed from the American public. We didn't know it at the time, but there were few who did. So, for example, in the book Rigged by Molly Hemingway, she describes how the Democrats went out of their way to establish
Hmm.
an opportunity for mail in ballots to be counted and states to count their votes in different ways than they had in decades past. And that's, so the evidence for cheating is out there, and more was going to be uncovered as time goes on. But if anything confirms that the 2020 election was stolen, as you mentioned earlier in the segment, the 2024 election proves it. How come
Yeah,
20 million
that's right.
people decided not to vote or even show up to vote this time around when they did for
Hmm.
Biden, back then? So if anything, we're on the right side of history yet again.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was funny that you mentioned it, because I 100% believe that the election was
Well,
stolen.
it was. There's too many anomalies going on. And
Oh, without a doubt.
what blew my mind was like, okay, so if you see all these anomalies in these states, why is it not our government's position to say, whoa, whoa, whoa,
To
put the
look into it.
brakes on. We need to really thoroughly look into it and not let the states look into it, but have some outsider look into it because you
Right.
can't have the same guilty party auditing themselves,
Right.
right?
And
It makes
anybody that
absolutely
wanted
no
to
sense.
investigate, is now suddenly the bad guy. Which
Yeah.
to me, that screams culpability. So
Hmm.
so that was interesting. But my time at college was great. So I built a We Are for Trump club in my freshman year. We were the only club on campus that was willing to endorse and acknowledge Donald Trump as the RNC nominee. The Republican Club on Penn State wouldn't do it at the time. We did, the Bull Moose Party. And so I was the chief of that tribe for a while. We built a wall around the American flag to demonstrate for Donald Trump and for everybody in Center County, Pennsylvania, to let them know it's okay to be a Trump supporter. And we made the news a couple times for that. But I maintained 5K runs. I transcribed Civil War journals. I painted murals. I mean, I had a very full college experience where I didn't just go to class. I loved college. I mean, if you think about it, I fought a war to go to college. And so I squeezed every last drop out of that experience. I danced in Thon. For anybody who knows what Penn State is and what Thon is, that's a big deal. It's a 46-hour dance marathon where you're on your feet the entire time. I did that. And so it was a lot of fun. I I didn't even get a college graduation though, because they weren't doing that because of the pandemic. So I had such a
Yeah.
mixed emotions about my college experience.
Well,
2020 was such a
yeah, the pandemic affected a lot of people in college. My chiropractor's student went to college during the pandemic and he couldn't pass his chiropractic bars 3 and 4 times. And he was just so defeated
oh
because they
yeah.
didn't give you good quality college. But, Robert, I really wanted to ask you this question because you have a military background and I'm a military wife. And I was really concerned and I was
Thank
wondering,
you for
did you
your service.
lose? Well, you know what I like to say? Thank you for coming home. Thank you
I
for coming
appreciate
home.
that. Yeah.
And what I wanted to ask, did this affect your benefits, your military benefits?
Yes.
Which is tragic,
Yeah, so prior to my conviction, which is illegal because I wasn't guilty of any crime, prior to my conviction, prior to my day in court, the VA clipped my wings and stopped my disability payments, of which the rating was uh, fairly high. I was rated for, all the, problems that I have in my body, but also for PTSD, which, it's not something that I'm proud of. But what I will say is that, you're, I get it if you're convicted of a crime to have your disability rating and or payments ceased. So if a veteran, God forbid, were to commit a crime that was heinous, yeah, he probably shouldn't get payments from the government anymore. But I wasn't even convicted of anything. While I was locked up in 2021, those payments stopped. I got a letter from the VA saying, you're a scumbag. Good luck. So that's something that I'm actually trying to rebuild as of right now. USAA, a veteran owned bank and supported owned bank, dumped me. My credit
Mm,
cards canceled. My bank accounts seized. I was literally broke, and everything that I had built up to that point was destroyed. In fact, 2024, I believe. Yeah, 2024. I also got sued by the state of Pennsylvania to remove my teaching credentials that I earned at Penn State. So, I mean, the hits just would not stop. For example, because of my military background, it was my worst nightmare on the planet to be incarcerated in our nation's capital, no less, and then watch from the window of my cell the Afghan pullout on live television, recognizing that everything that I had sacrificed there and all the carnage that me and my brothers had to endure and all the families that had to sacrifice their loved ones in that desert, all of it went up in smoke because of Biden and because
Yeah.
of everybody in his cabinet. So it was like my nightmare, my worst nightmare coming true. Insult to injury. I'm in jail for not only serving my country honorably, but standing up for what I believe in and ringing the bell about the stolen election. And then in front of it all, everything that I invested toward for Afghanistan goes up in smoke. A couple years later, everything that I did at Penn State goes up in smoke. So I'm in a stage in my life now where I'm drastically trying to rebuild at a fast
Mm-hmm.
pace. It's very difficult because the halfway house that I'm at, as you know, is an obstacle. It's not there to, help you
Mm-hmm.
get to reintegrate into society. It's there to hold you back and hopefully take you back to prison. So it is like I am navigating through a minefield that has been meticulously designed through decades and decades of abuse of power and misdirection, so that everybody thinks that when people go to jail, they might come out a better person, or that when people go to jail, that's where they belong. This BOP is designed to make monsters out of men
Yeah, because it's really beaten down on your soul. I mean, when you strip somebody from everything.
and
I mean,
everyone.
what's left? How, and your family turns against you or your
Yep.
friends turn against you. It's really difficult because we are human beings and we have emotions, we have feelings, we have love, we have
Well, what I will tell
sorrow.
you
I
is
mean, it's
this.
just
You asked the question of what's left. For me, the only thing that I had left was my faith in Jesus Christ. Everything was actually taken from me. My brother has
mm,
disowned me. My dad barely speaks to me anymore. And he's the one that sat me down to watch movies like Patriot and Braveheart and had me listen to Creed and make me study the Constitution and love our founding fathers. Totally did a 180 flip on his politics and everything like that. My mom's still around and God bless her soul for that, because I don't think I would have made it this far without her. But quite literally, everything has been taken from me except Jesus Christ and the promise that he gives about an afterlife with him, and acknowledging that the world hated him first. So if it hates you too, do not be discouraged. And so my faith in Christ has exploded from where it used to be. And I've never had the confidence that I have now, that Jesus is walking by my side the entire time, not as some kind of imaginary friend, but as someone who I've invited into my heart, that will never leave
mm-hmm.
me nor forsake me. So, and that's honestly the beautiful thing about, what Joseph is talking about in Genesis 50. What you designed for evil, God always intended for good. I know that this has been a horrific time of my life, but it was a terrible gift, because as a outcome, I have become a better man, and I can't wait to be a good husband and a good father, so that I can proudly say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that's the way that
Yeah.
I'm playing this.
And you're right, because the Lord is with you. Have no fear, for God is near. And as long as you keep Christ in your heart and God in your soul, everybody's going to help and gravitate to you. Good things will come to you because God will defend you.
Completely.
And, I don't know if I can ask you this question or not. I don't want to get you in trouble, but is it fair to say the FBI harassed, blackmailed, and targeted J6ers to sign off on crimes they didn't commit?
Completely. The best evidence of that is, well, first of all, the whole violent, nonviolent discrepancy between January 6ers is totally bogus. There's so much video footage of people that were sucked into the lobster trap. There's so many video footage of people that were attacked by the police, and then they defended themselves. But I think all you have to do is Google the name Matthew Perna and find out if whether or not the FBI intimidated people into signing plea deals, because the weight
Mm-hmm.
that our government put on him was so immense that that young man took his life. Okay,
Yeah,
so
they're stripping you of everything.
the blood of Matthew Perna is on the DOJ, is on Merrick Garland and
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Wray and Biden and all them. They don't care about the American people. I'm convinced that only our nation's enemies would behave the way that they have in their positions of power. So they're not making mistakes. They're making deliberate decisions to ruin the lives of American people, especially the fighters in America so that the rest of y'all don't stand up anytime that election is stolen again in the future or anytime that our rights are violated in the future, because they will.
That's
That's the
right.
trademark
Instill
of a
fear.
communist.
Instill
Yes.
fear amongst the people so they will not rise up.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it does. You know, people look at New York City. They don't I grew up in New York, and I grew up in a time where if somebody was attacking somebody, somebody would jump in to help.
Right. Right.
These days nobody wants to jump in. Look what happened to Daniel Penny. I
Yep.
jump in to save somebody, I'm going to be a Daniel Penny.
Yep.
And
That's thanks
it
to Attorney
drives you
General Bragg.
broke. It drives you broke because as
Yes.
an American citizen, we're just hardworking Americans. We
Yeah.
can't fight the government. Same thing with unconstitutional state laws. We can't fight them. They can make all the unconstitutional state laws they want to make, but who's going to go up against them?
Right.
You
Well,
know,
I will say this, that I think, I've agreed with you on everything up until this point. I think you can fight them. And I think that that's what they're afraid of. And I think that they have tried very hard to convince you that you can't. But if you and just a couple of your listeners wanted to be brave, that's the government's worst nightmare.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You know what's been concerning me too, Robert, is JD Vance's statement on the J6 pardons.
Yes.
I'm like, what is he actually saying? What I wanted to do is bring up a chronology of 5 months ago, 4 weeks ago, and a few days ago, so
Sure.
our audience can take a look and see what's concerning me about this. And we have to read into it. What is he saying? So let's bring that shot up.
To ask you about January.
So I'm going to rewind. Oh
I
yeah,
would love to ask you about January 6th. You've called yourself the candidate of law and order. When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely. Sure. You called them patriots.
Nothing is perfect in life, but you have people from Minneapolis, you have people just from 5 days ago in Washington, D.C. They were having fistfights and fighting with the police. They were spraying and destroying, they were desecrating our monuments in Washington, D.C. 5 days ago, and nothing happened to them. And you can't have two systems of justice.
You promised to pardon those who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Are you still vowing to follow through with that promise?
We're looking at it right now, most likely, yeah.
Well,
those people have suffered long and hard, and there may be some exceptions to it. I have to look. These people have suffered. Their lives have been destroyed. I'm going to be acting very quickly.
Within your first 100 days, first day?
First day.
Pardons, President Trump says there's a process. Where is the line drawn on who will and wouldn't be considered for a pardon?
I think it's very simple. Look, if you protested peacefully on January the 6th and you've had Merrick Garland's Department of Justice treat you like a gang member, you should be pardoned. If you committed violence on that day, obviously you shouldn't be pardoned. And there's a little bit of a gray area there, but we're very much committed to seeing the equal administration of law. And there are a lot of people, we think, in the wake of January the 6th who were prosecuted unfairly. We need to rectify that.
Okay, so what concerns me is some of the verbiage in that. You know, we've got we've got, some people committed crimes, but then again, we just said it, people signed off on crimes they didn't do.
Right.
So how are they going to be evaluating that? Are they going to just look at the paperwork, or are they actually going to talk to each person? I think there's probably over 2,000 people now. So that's what concerns me about all that verbiage.
Well, to answer your question, I think that what JD Vance's response is very ignorant of what has taken place. And luckily, we have incredible people in this nation that have been keeping a very watchful eye over the development of January 6th. Julie Kelly's all over it. Lara Logan's all over it. You got people like the Hodge twins coming out of left field, ringing the bell like, hey, man, what you said was wrong. You're exactly right, Joan, where you had people sign pleas that they did not perform acts of violence, and yet the gun that the feds put to the back of their head says you need to sign this or you're going away forever. So the non-violent discrepancy is broken. The charge that I have that makes me a violent January 6er is a simple assault, and you can get a simple assault from flicking somebody in the elbow. So and Donald Trump's response was great at that convention there. He said, "You just watched people in our nation's capital desecrate monuments, get fistfights and cops, and nothing happened to them." And we watched that in 2020. We watched that throughout entire time of Biden's, I guess, imposter time as a president, where whether you're a Hamas supporter or you work for Colbert, you can desecrate the Capitol, you can fight cops, you can obstruct an official proceeding. Nothing happens to you. But somebody like me or other veterans who have served the country honorably watch an innocent woman or child get beaten or shot at, and we decide to try to defend them or at least engage. And now the full weight of the law is being thrown at us, I think is not only hypocritical, it's shameful. Here's something to consider. If the January 6ers are not released on day one of Donald Trump's presidency, those are his political prisoners now, not Biden's. So that's a bad look. If you
Yeah.
don't release the political prisoners on day one, Donald Trump, we're now your political prisoners. There's no one to blame anymore except for you and your new Department of Justice. So that's what I think is key here to remember. And here's something else. And this is one of the reasons why that JD Vance statement really spooks me more than just about January 20th is if he really is a Republican, then he would acknowledge that we're the party of stand your ground laws and concealed carry permits and the Second Amendment. We're also the party that is willing to sacrifice our lives and do violence in other nations for the safety of our own. So if we're the party that flies flags that say "Don't tread on me," why not? Because what? We might get violent. In certain scenarios, we are the party of violence. And those certain scenarios include protecting your loved ones and protecting your country. Well, ladies and
That's
gentlemen,
right.
we watched an insurrection happen on November 3rd. So what else are we supposed to do than protect our country? And if it really was an insurrection, that's the stupidest insurrection that ever happened in the history of mankind because nobody had any weapons for that.
Yeah, they had
So
the Trump flagpoles.
yeah, yeah.
But
So I'm a
yeah,
little fired up about it, as you can imagine, not just because I want to get a pardon. I've got deep friends of mine that were put in a rock and a hard place situation, and they either defended themselves or they defended others. They're amazing Christians. They're incredible men that are still locked up right now. That, according to JD Vance, will remain in prison for another decade, and that they do not
yeah.
deserve that.
No, they
And
don't.
so it's tragic to hear that kind of response come out of his mouth. However, I know that he did try to clean things up later on social media, but I think it's crucial for everybody that's listening to your show to call him up, tag him on social media, and reference this podcast, reference this interview, and or just reference what it means to be a Republican. The whole point of
Mhm.
having a firearm on your hip is so that you defend what you love, not so you can wave it around like a gangbanger or like an idiot that ought to go to jail, but to have something beside you so that you and your loved ones who trust you can be confident that you will keep them safe. Our nation
Yeah.
is like a family that must be kept safe by righteous men and women who are willing to do violence on our behalf. Not
Mhm.
everybody can protect this country. And that's why there's a war on men. That's why there's a war on the family. That's why it's easier to get the shot and easier to be a tranny than have to face the weight of social pressure to stand on your 2 feet. It's easier to deny Christ 3 times. Believe me, Peter did it. But it's better to stand on your 2 feet, to declare that you're a free man, to reference your documents, reference your history, reference your rights, and reference your God in the biblical text to remember that one, you're not alone, just like me in prison, but that two, we didn't keep this ground by backing down. So I think we need to start going on the offensive as a party and demand that these January 6ers get released, not only so that we can be the party of law and order, because there's a huge disparity, as we just discussed, but also so that, just like the Penny situation, if you defend somebody that's innocent, you shouldn't have to go to prison for that.
No, you shouldn't. He's a hero.
And so are many people that are locked up today.
Mhm. You're I love your inspiration. I love your
Thank you.
words, your words of power. I can see God and Christ is in you. And
Thank you.
Robert, tell people how they can help.
Sure. Well, I think that going to social media or just the internet and typing up, for example, if you right now went onto YouTube, or Google and typed in, "This is a setup," in quotes, January 6th, you'll find a video where police officers are admitting that January 6th is a setup. Don't just watch it for yourself, because I'm assuming that everybody that's watching your show is pretty much on our team. Show it to somebody else. Another way that you can help, and this is a big one for me and Kelly Meggs, an Oath Keeper from Florida, guys. So Florida, let's show up here. Kelly Meggs, as you know, is the leader of the Oath Keepers chapter. He and I, in the year 2023, were locked in a cell for 2 months in Philadelphia, 2 blocks away from Liberty Hall. In that time, we wrote a book. It got smuggled out of prison and is now available on Amazon. The book is called One Question Remains. And I highly encourage everybody that's listening to this to not just buy the book so you can support us, but read the book and educate yourself on just how ridiculous of a lobster trap January 6th really was. We identify plot holes in the narrative, but we also link everything that has happened from January 6th back to 2016, when Donald Trump, stepped down that escalator and said he's going to run for president, everything like that. We rewind the clock so everything in between those two periods of time makes sense. All those loose ends are tied into a single thread, and everyone that's reading the book can be withdrawn from the matrix. That's the whole point. We want individuals to be educated. We want individuals to feel pride in being an American again. And so the book One Question Remains, that's available on Amazon now, does that, but it also offers a path forward. We argue that the only way that we're going to make America great again is by making America God's America. So it's the exact same acronym. But the idea with the book is to educate yourself. It's one of the first of its kind that's out there, written by 2 political prisoners while incarcerated, smuggled out of prison, and now it's available. It's one of the best ways that you can support us, via educating yourself and those that you love. So that would be one of the things that I would recommend. Other than that, though, just be brave. Have the courage to not just talk at the TV and agree with what you hear on Fox News. Go out and try to educate somebody, or go out and vote, or run for office. If you think that you can do better than the bimbo that you see on the television ruining our country, take his or her place. So that's what I would say. Be brave. We're going to be okay. The January 6ers, we're resourceful people. This situation has dragged us through the mud so much that we have learned to survive on our own. And the American people have shown up to help in beautiful ways. We've received letters from all across the country. People have donated to our commissary funds and things like that. So what the Democrats did by trying to steal an election and by having January 6th happen is you actually challenged the American people to rise to the occasion, and we are. And so it's a beautiful thing. Now you have an entire league of men that are going to enter government. We are going to enter small business and big business with the determination that we found in the lion's den, where the Democrats were hoping we would be eaten alive, but we were actually built up instead.
Yeah, those are really inspiring words. Will the purchase of this book help you guys out to get back on your feet after all of this tragedy to your lives?
It will. We do make a little bit of a profit of it. I think we make $4 a pop off of it because we're publishing it through Amazon. But I think what matters more to both Kelly and I, and I'm speaking on his behalf because I know him pretty well now after spending 2 months in a cell with this guy, is that we would rather see our nation improve as a whole. And this book is a little tool to do so. And so when Kelly Meggs comes back to Florida, I hope everybody listening not only has a book for him to sign, because there's an Easter egg that I hid in there that you guys will actually enjoy. The Easter egg is this: on the last page of the book, you guys will see that it's empty, except for the last lines of the Declaration of Independence at the top, which read, "With a firm reliance on the protection of Providence, we here pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." And the idea is that you, the owner of the book, can sign your name and then collect signatures of January 6ers so that we too can sign our names to an historic document, thus binding ourselves to history. And the book, One Question Remains, becomes a collector's item and becomes a part of the growing January 6th community. So you're not going to want to miss out on that. When you meet a J6er, you're going to want his signature in the back of that book where I just instructed you guys to go. The book is called One Question Remains, and it's a nice little toolkit to understand that if you saw something wrong on January 6th, you weren't wrong. or the stolen election or 2020's pandemic, you weren't wrong. And we tie them all together because January 6th isn't an isolated event. You don't have January 6th without the stolen election. You don't have the stolen election without the pandemic. And you don't
That's
have the
right.
pandemic without the election that Donald Trump was supposed to lose. And you're going to find it all in the book.
That's great. Are you guys thinking of doing a documentary?
Without a doubt. So the documentary, movies, we've even talked about having a Netflix miniseries where, it's a day in the life in the J6ers political prisoners, jail term, So there's a lot of different ways we're going to go about it. But, it's, to kind of bring it back to your initial question about violent, nonviolent, we describe our personal testimonies in the book as well. So you're not just getting like a nice little conspiracy theory roadmap of all these different lines going all the different directions, like in someone's basement. What you're actually also getting is testimony of what it was like that day, how cold it was that day.
It was
How
freezing that
it
day.
was freezing that day. It was
And
chaotic that
also,
day.
I don't think people realize, but the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers volunteered and did some security for Trump on the podium where he was on that stage, the bleacher area
Yes.
where Trump was doing his speech where at the
Yes.
rally. So they were actually volunteers working security for him that day.
Yes. Well, you'll get a kick out of this. We actually dive into that in the book, and we actually name drop somebody. I'll spoil this a little bit for you guys here on this show, but the name that I want you guys to look into is a guy called Ali Alexander. He's the one that not only invited the Oath Keepers and invited the Proud Boys, but he's also the one that literally organized the Stop the Steal rally, set it up to coincide with the certification result ceremony. And on top of that, on his website, which the link is in the book that you can go and type in once you get it, you can find there's a map on his website for January 6th, and on it is a location called Wild Protest Zone on the east side of the Capitol. Why would that be involved? First of all. Second of all, why didn't he go to prison like the rest of us did? And why did everything he did get pinned on Trump and the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, but not him? Yeah,
Right.
weird
Very
how that worked out.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
very interesting.
But
We've
meanwhile,
got
a guy with a Lego set gets pinned for being the architect of the insurrection.
Yeah, we've got Michael Bolak, who has some comments there. He purchased your book, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
So,
Tell him thank you for
yeah,
me, please. That's
yes. And
awesome.
Michael Bolak, he's with To the Point podcast, and John
Okay.
Karapi because you went on John Karapi's show. So we're all partners,
Yes,
actually.
yes.
Yeah. So, but this has
Love
been a
it.
great interview, and I really wanted to get you guys on before January 20th because after I heard, JD Vance's comments, I was really worried. I was like, are there going to be J6ers left behind? We can't let that happen. And
Right.
I really feel, with everything that's going on in our nation right now, where we've got illegals coming in and they're letting them run around and just take, assassinate our people.
Well, not only
And I'm like,
assassinate, they're lighting our young ladies on fire in subways, and
fire and
they're lighting
subways.
homes on fire in California. Illegal immigrants are the ones responsible for the fires in California. We've got the videos.
Yeah, it's just tragic what's happening to our nations. And a lot of people out there at J6ers, there were a lot of military guys like you, and even people
Yes.
in the police force, Green Berets. It's not just, citizens. It was a mixture of our patriots. And that's why you guys are the patriots, because you guys take an oath to the Constitution, and when people have a grievance, they should be able to go and rally quietly. Washington, D.C. is a no arms state. You cannot bring your firearms in that state.
Right.
You had to go to Washington, D.C. and make sure that you were not carrying any illegal in their state. To me, it's a District of Columbia, but to me, it shouldn't even have all of these unconstitutional laws because we are America, where the Second Amendment is our right. So
Yes.
there should be no state that impedes your ability to walk into that state with your
Agreed.
firearm.
Agreed.
So for anybody to think that they went there for an insurrection. It wasn't. It was to share grievances, and sometimes things get out of hand. And there was Antifa over there. There were
Yes.
people there nefariously
Well, I did time with
there
them.
for the reason to start things.
That's the other thing I want your viewers to understand is that we were literally locked up with Antifa members who only up until they were about to get sentenced did they start to reveal who they really were. So, for example, there's a guy named Josiah Kenyon who is actually nuts. He's a habitual liar. But when we finally cornered him, and I know you guys know who Barry Ramey is, he's a good friend of mine, also from Florida. Love the guy. But
Yeah, I'm trying to interview Barry Ramey.
he's an excellent dude. You'll love it. And I love what he's doing with the shades these days. That's great. But he's probably just trying to compete with the hair. It's no big deal. But anyways,
We'll see. I'm gonna get him on.
I hope. I can't wait. But anyways, what happened was we cornered Josiah Kenyon, and he admitted that he fessed up to the FBI, saying that he only showed up to January 6th and wanted to instigate the crowd. Quote, I wanted them to fire. Meaning that he was literally willing to do whatever it took so that the cops pull the trigger on Americans. He literally admitted that he's a communist. He wore some kind of stupid costume that day and put a MAGA hat on. He is Antifa. Cowboy Logic
Yeah.
has interviewed Antifa members who admitted that they had people embedded in the crowd. I mean, the list goes on and on of how much we were set up that day. And I
You were.
wish that people were willing to take the time to investigate these things because, you know, Nick Searcy's movie, Capital Punishment, shows people changing out of costumes that day. And so it's almost like a willful ignorance at this point. If you're not willing to acknowledge the fact that January 6th was a lobster trap, you don't want to face the facts and own up that maybe you were wrong. And that's sad because that's pride right there. And we can't have pride. You know, a lot of people like to quote the Bible that says in Proverbs that pride comes before the fall. But it also says in Proverbs that humility comes before honor. So if we really want to redeem this country, we have to be humble enough to serve the Lord. And we have to be humble enough to admit that we might have made some mistakes, maybe as individuals or as nations, but we also have to accept Jesus's challenge to deny ourselves, pick up our cross, which would be our nation, and follow him with it. And that is literally how we fix this country.
Wow, that's just so powerful, Robert. You've just, this experience has been difficult for you, but you've grown so much. Your soul has just expanded, and it's a beautiful thing. And
Thank you.
I'm going to continue praying for you, and I'm so appreciative that you came on the show today. I really want people to meet the J6ers, to understand that you guys are people just like us, and you
Yeah.
did not go up there to cause an insurrection. It was not an insurrection.
I was
It was a
going
government
home.
turned. It was a government turned against the people and
Yes.
instigating the people, and the people are just going to try to defend each other. There were people trying to save people's lives in there.
Yes.
Roseanne, that young lady that was trampled on and then beat by a Capitol Police
Lila
while
Morris
she was
is her name.
unconscious.
Yep.
She died.
Yeah.
She was in that tunnel. There's a video of her in the tunnel, and one of those bullets hit her in the head, the rubber bullets, and she fell down in the crowd. She's a large woman, and Roseanne
Boylan. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it was the
beaten to
people
death
that
by
were,
Lila Morris.
yes,
And Lila Morris wasn't reprimanded for that. She was given front row seats at a Super Bowl for that. So a murderer, just like Michael Byrd, the one who assassinated Ashley Babbitt, they're being rewarded. They're being rewarded for what they've done, for spilling innocent American blood. And so it's sinister what this government's willing to do. You know, I was on my way home. I had a job interview the very next day that I showed up to with a black eye. You know, I did get the job, but I had no intention of taking over the government, let alone with a plastic children's toy. But what the government has done to the people is sick. It's sick. There should be no mercy for these people that have ruined this country and almost decimated it, I would argue. And it's a miracle that this happened in the 2020 election, because had it happened in the 2024 election, there would be no Donald Trump to come and save us. So everything kind of fell into place the way that it needed to, so that this country really could be saved. The Democrats, they made a plan, and it was almost successful to really overthrow this country, but because of the American people, it's never going to happen here.
Yeah, yeah, we love our country, and we understand liberty and freedom and the value that it has and our inalienable rights. And it's we've got Donald Trump in, but there's still a lot of work ahead of us.
Yes.
And like we were just talking about JD Vance, we need these people weren't there. Well,
No.
Trump was there at the rally, but JD Vance, he's got a little bit of growing to do, and it's up to us to reach out and touch him and say,
Yes.
hey, this is how it is. And, I wanted to say, Robert, when I asked you earlier, do they, blackmail you guys to sign things? I was reading through all the cases, you can look them up on the government site. And there was a lot of stuff in there on a lot of different J6ers. Is it fair to say that some of those things in there are not really true?
Completely. Yeah, the
That they're
government is
fabricated?
yeah, the government is definitely willing to lie and exaggerate. I mean, so for example, like in my sentencing hearing, my prosecutor literally said the words in describing me and my character that I was willing to go and teach in a high school and educate the students on how to become domestic terrorists. She said that was a part of my curriculum, and the judge just nods on. Doesn't say, "Whoa, what are you talking about here? That we're not going to have libel in the courtroom." No, in my case, any and every lie was okay to say, so that I could be demonized and I could look like the monster that they wanted us all to be. But see, here's the thing. Once you find out their game, now you know how to beat them. I knew that as long as I maintained my integrity and I kept my cool, that I would shame my enemies, I would shame the people that abandoned me, and I would fight back with the right hook of integrity. And I would prove to them that I wasn't the monster that they said that I was, because I was able to be constructive of myself and those around me. I was able to dive deeper into the word and become a better man of God. That's the best way to fight back against these people, is by proving them wrong. And so, yes, we were lied about, we were shamed, we were scourged. But the best way to respond to this stuff is to suffer well, as we're instructed to do in the New Testament. And you're not supposed to suffer as a murderer or as a thief. But if you suffer as a Christian, we're actually supposed to take pride in that, because not only does the world hate us, but I would rather be enemies with the villains that are in our government now than buddies with them. And so, and
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons why, like in my sentencing speech, I was proud to say that Donald Trump did not force me or coerce me to do what I did that day. I did it all on my own accord. I'll own what I did, but I didn't do much more than trespass or picket. How
Mm-hmm.
am I supposed to take a shield or a fence and put that in my back pocket and run? I'm supposedly guilty of a robbery charge, but the last time I checked, a fence doesn't fit into this big of a box in your pocket. So it was very dishonest. It was very disparaging, but it
They were
wasn't
just
just they
they were
yeah, they
just
tried to do anything they
finding
could.
anything to lock you up is what it
Another
was.
thing that you can consider too is that one of the main charges that they used in order to lock us up for up to 20 years, which was the 1512 charge, the obstruction of an official proceeding, was thrown out
Mm-hmm.
by the Supreme Court. So one of the main charges that you hit everybody with to confirm that the narrative was going to be true, that these guys are worse than Osama bin Laden, but we can't give them misdemeanors because then they're going to do 48 hours of community service, like someone who punched a cop that supports Hamas last year. Nah, we can't have that. We're going to hit them with a charge that we know is garbage, called the 1512 charge, that the Supreme Court last year chucked out. So now I did time for a charge that doesn't even exist on my record anymore, and yet they won't even remove it. So the lies
Mm.
are abundant. All you got to do is take the time to look into that. But I think we've referenced like 5 major cases right now within this conversation to expose the hypocrisy of January 6th. They're all in the book, though. That little thing, One Question Remains, is like a library of how, like, the disparities of January 6th. So, when we're talking about, trying to set someone like JD straight, or a hater that's out there that's only going to repeat the Operation Mockingbird that they found on MSNBC or CNN, slip them One Question Remains. Have them read it. I've convinced 3 people on my bus route now to buy the book, and they did. And I've asked them fervently, talk to me about it. Let's have a discussion about it. This is what America is supposed to be like, where you and I see a 6 and I see a 9, but we can explain to each other that maybe we're looking at the same thing from different angles. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was, to try to bring this conversation full circle, when I was in college and I was in charge of that Trump club my freshman year in 2016, Trump was running for president. And it was one of the coolest things for me to do, to be in charge of a club that was willing to, abide by the recommendations that I was kind of, copycatting from 2nd Ranger Battalion as being a quiet professional. And when we had that wall around the American flag, the coolest thing I heard was people that had walked away from that demonstration, regardless of their political affiliation, saying those were the most respectful Trump supporters I had ever met. And that's something that we ought to hold ourselves to. We got to be accountable to a higher standard if we really want to save this country, but also rob our enemies of any accusations and shame them for their dishonesty because
Mm-hmm.
of our higher moral fiber.
Right. Well, I feel like your book, One Question Remains, is going to be very enlightening. And I
Thank
know
you.
we're running short in time because you're on your lunch hour. So just want to
I
close
am. I'm
this
at work
out.
right now.
Yeah,
That's why I
you
look
are.
filthy.
So thank you for the time, Robert. It really was. It's important for us to hear your stories and to see you guys for the people that you are, not what they're trying to turn you into. So I wanted to thank you for joining us. Remind everybody to purchase your book on Amazon. One Question Remains, and
Thank you.
wish you luck. And I want to talk to you again soon. I'm going to get your book and I'm going to read it and we're going to talk about it.
I would love that. Thank you so much. And then I will sign it when I meet you in person.
Oh, that'll be great. That'll be great. Now you're in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, yes. But when I
Yeah.
get pardoned, first order of business is seeing my granddad that's kind of losing his marbles. So I need to see him before he forgets who I am. I got another batch of grandparents that I need to thank. And then I'm going to do a little pilgrimage around America to shake the hands of people that I have yet to meet, but who were there for me every step of the way.
Well, you got to make a trip to Florida.
Oh, I intend to. I have many friends in Florida now.
Well, you've got a friend here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, well, you got a friend here in Pennsylvania.
All right. Well, you have a good day and thank you for coming home and thank you for being so strong and inspirational. We love you.
I appreciate you. I love you back. Thank you, and God bless you. Be brave.